With the prayers of holy followers of Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. This is Father Joseph Swaden. I am here. We're doing the live Q&A on Wednesday. We missed out on Sunday. A lot of things happened that were kind of, they got in the way. So we had to move it to later on in the week. And of course, plans are constantly changing. I was hoping His Grace Bishop Enoch would be with us right now. I'm hoping he may come in later so that we can review these modern Western right texts, and then bam, I got hit with news, and the news was what I was actually about to cover about the whole Vatican thing. So we are going to do that next. And then somebody pointed out there is actually a live stream going on right now between Father Peter Heers and David Erhan on the review of his book on baptism. Now we know, because we're the high info people here, that kind of David is basically a party line guy. And so maybe this is like going to be a stream where it's totally about being red pilled, but I feel like we have to go completely meta on this. And what that means is I want to live review the live stream live. So let's try it. I want to see if it works. Maybe it won't work. Maybe it just won't work. I don't know. I don't know if StreamYard is designed like this, but I'm going to try it anyway, and we'll see what happens. If it doesn't work, then we just go to our main story. But let's try this. Okay, here we go. And now we're going to turn on the volume.
Accept our baptism. We don't care. We're not going to accept the baptism. And then he says, even if they have the form, even if they say the names, we're not going to accept it. Where Rome is accepting it. So right there in St. Basil's 47th canon, which I've never heard or seen anyone address on the other side of this topic. I've never heard anybody seriously address it. They just ignore it. There was a list going around.
Is this working?
I think it was the one produced by Athanatos or something. I don't remember, about a year ago. And, or maybe it was the other fellow who talks about this a lot. I forget his name, but
maybe Petrus,
maybe Uwe Petrus, but I think it was it was someone else. But anyway, they just skipped over it, or they claimed it as on the other side, and there was no analysis. It's impossible to make sense of Saint Basil without the economia crivia distinction. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, yeah, everyone knows
that. And I think just from a very basic standpoint in Orthodoxy in general, it's one of the things that is actually a distinguishing mark of Orthodoxy is that there are rules, right? These rules are, ideally one should follow them to perfection, but due to the weakness of human beings, due to their, at the moment, their training in the virtue, or in other words,
I'm always serious,
in the path to repentance, right, and path to acquiring the heavenly virtues, there are certain economia ascribed, and I will also go as far as to say that economia, right, has this meaning of managing the household, right, which it basically means that the bishop, as the patriarch, has the power and responsibility to delegate matters however he sees
I don't know how to
that's
do
kind
this.
Of the other aspect of economy. And
but if I did, I would.
In history delegates the issue of baptism, amongst many other things, according to how they see fit, right?
Where's the talk about
you can't take that, you cannot take economia away from the archpriest or the priest. It's impossible. The minute you do that, I mean, the canons presuppose economia, right? They presuppose there is a manager of the household taking those canons and following the spirit and at times the letter, but definitely the spirit, and applying it to particular circumstances. That's economia, right? That's the management of the household of faith. So anybody who says,
made everyone.
Father Peter or the book or anybody says that the rigorous do away with economia, it's exactly the opposite. We double down on economia, and we say you can't understand our practice with economia. What they don't get is that we say, yes, economia, absolutely, but there are presuppositions and there is a patristic tradition as to how to apply it. We need to follow that to be faithful to the fathers. But no, there's no way you can do away with economia and be orthodox or be pastorally exist and function.
But what about the fact that there's you're using too much economia? It's you're using it for everyone.
Like they kind of they kind of ask this question to others and they're trying to seek answers to it. And the basic question again is, I was baptized a Roman Catholic, and then I became Orthodox, and I was chrismated. Am I baptized and am I not? And to those who are listening, due to the theological principles of the Orthodox Church, one will say, well, the heretical baptism that had no power has the power the moment, right, the salvific power, you get it the moment you are received into the church.
What about
And
all these receptions of
I think
official
St. Augustine
baptisms for
used the
Roman
analogy
Catholics,
of kind of a
Protestants,
soldier's
etc.?
mark, right? Like if you're not a soldier, if you're not received into the military and you have a soldier's mark, then it doesn't really mean anything, right? It's just kind of it's just a physical thing. But the moment if you're received into the military, but they don't
And that's the
reapply
rub.
the mark, right? So to
That's
speak,
the
like
rub.
that's kind of what he tries to justify. But the theological principle behind it is that well, you had the physical aspect, now you gain the spiritual aspect, and that's what fulfills it. And in terms of economia, one argument I have heard a lot is that when you point out to the canons, and they will say, "Well, look at these canons. Certain heretics are received by chrismation, right?"
You're
And
receiving everybody
canons,
by
by
chrismation.
definition, do not describe economia. So this actually is akrivia, right? I've heard some people make this argument, and
Yeah.
I don't know where they get that argument from because actually canons can describe economic realities. I mean, have you checked St. Theodore of Canterbury's canons on divorce? I mean, it's full of it's full. I mean, the whole thing is economia in and of itself, I will say. And a lot of it, like he goes very much further. Like he lists a lot of
I kind of
reasons
wish Bishop
that
Enoch was here because
from an
he'd
Acrivian
offer a
standpoint,
lesson
he
on
won't
St.
exempt you
Theodore of
for
Canterbury's
divorce, right? Like I don't want to get
confessional. This
into
is
it
kind of
because
ridiculous.
I think if
But I'm going to
people
try to watch
really
this for a
read
little more.
Canon
It's getting a little
yourself,
painful. It's all
they'll see that
justification of
I
economia.
mean, he just basically says, there's these different
Mass
lists, and you can use
economia.
these as reasons to get a divorce, and they're not due to adulterous reasons, certainly. So one will say those are examples of canons that describe the presuppositions for economy, right?
Yes.
So canons can do that. Canons
Yes.
can describe economic things.
I'm
They're
glad
not.
you brought this up. This is a really important thing. People think every canon becomes an akrivia. We must follow the canon. For instance, 95 of Trullo, 1,300 years ago, they said this about
Who thinks
those
this?
heretics
Honestly, who
today.
thinks this?
Therefore, we must chrismate whatever Roman Catholics. I mean, it is such a jump and so ridiculous. How did we get to the point where we're doing that? I don't know. The canon there, and every canon is there particularly to answer something in that day and to say, what do we do in this case, in these situations? It's by definition, it's economy. And I mean, it's an application of the gospel. The akrivia is the gospel, right? The gospel is the akrivia. What the Lord said, you must be baptized. And then how that's going to happen and how that salvation is, the economy of salvation is worked out in each time and place is economy. I mean, that's what the church is doing. It's taking.
And in this time and place, the Greek Archdiocese universally baptizes, chrismates, Roman Catholics, Protestants, and so does a lot of the OCA.
And it says right in the canon, actually 95, it says, these heretics this way, all others, baptism. So what's all others? That's the rule. That's the akrivia. Right there, you see the distinction in canon 95. I mean, just to double down on what you're saying, it's really pretty obvious, I think, in the canons.
Yeah, and since we're speaking about the Council of Trullo, I mean, I find it really interesting that people are using Canon 95 to say that the accepting the baptism of heretics is something that we should do, etc., etc. I find it really interesting because, again, the apostolic canons, which very explicitly and very completely say heretics do not have baptism, heretical bishops cannot baptize, they don't have any sacramental power. You're talking about those apostolic canons, right? The 95 apostolic canons. Trullo accepts those canons. So, if
and why don't the bishops?
And then you accept 95 in the Roman Catholic reading, let's say, well, there's clearly a contradiction.
Boom.
So a lot of them will kind of
right
say,
here. I'm going to just lower them for a second because this is so true. Then can the unleavened bread become the body of Christ by economia? You see where this goes? Absolutely. It's opening Pandora's box of chaos, and that's really what they've been doing for the past 50 or so years. Let's see what else I have to say.
The fathers got together. I mean, in the canon itself, why do these canons exist? For the salvation of the people, right? It's clear that they're for the correction and the salvation of the people. The canons are exalted for that purpose. So it's certainly not some bookkeeping that they're doing.
And one of the other canons they accept, the canons of the canon rather of Carthage from Saint Cyprian himself, yes. Right, on this very matter. So it's very clear that what Trullo is doing is that it's saying, okay, look, we have these canons beforehand, and these are canons that are accepted in the church. We follow these canons, and then we have canons of our own due to the circumstances of our present time, and that's what Canon 95 is about. Is due to the conditions of that time. They basically say, okay, the XYZ heretics, we receive them in this way. Other heretics we receive them
All right,
in that
hold
way.
on. We're gonna take a break from. Yes, hold on. We're gonna take a break because Bishop Enoch may enter the stream in just a moment. Yes. Okay, so that was moderately entertaining, and we might make that a little video. But hopefully Bishop Enoch will come in, and then I'm going to hit him with the surprise news article that we put up because it just popped out, and we are all hip with the news and stuff. We know what's going on. The pulse of society. It's what we're. All right, I'll just stop. In any case, just waiting on Bishop Enoch to see if he will pop on. Let me see here. Yeah, I had a feeling that they were going to just kind of present this whole this is exactly the canonical form and the right order should be properly by baptism, strictness, etc. But that's not what any of them are doing. I mean, what's the point? It's like, I get that. I'm 100% sure, and I haven't read the book yet, but I'm 100% sure that 95% of everything that's in Father Peter Hears' book is correct. And his bishops don't care. None of them care. That's the point. Is he, huh? Okay. I think he died. Okay, so, let me see here. We are still waiting. I think Bishop Enoch is going to come on, which means we will be able to talk about, we'll be able to do a little bit of reviewing of these Western Rite prayer books that are being issued by the Antiochians, and we will be able to talk about the news story. I thought that was an interesting experiment to jump on a live stream of a live stream. Give me a moment. Benedicite?
Benedicite.
Okay.
What is the program about tonight?
Well, a few different things, because it kind of went into a little bit of a snowball. Originally, I was just going to play catch up, and we were going to talk about these Western Rite, Antiochian Western Rite prayer books, so on and so forth. I wanted to touch onto that, but then there was news, big news. I don't know if you've heard this yet, but I'm about to put it on from NFTU's website because I did actually write an article for it. One moment, and let me see here. And I have to, share it. Have you seen this yet?
Yeah, I think I did. I saw it a little bit ago.
The Vatican approves baptism for transgenders as well as baptizing children acquired by same-sex couples. I guess these are some transgender people. That's what Google's. I don't know. The Vatican officially released a statement saying people who have undergone sex reassignment surgery can now be baptized so long as there is, quote, no risk of causing a public scandal or disorientation among the faithful, end quote. Following this logic, the Vatican's response to questions from Bishop Jose Negri of Santo Amaro in Brazil, with official approval from Pope Francis given October 31st, also allowed for the adopted children of same-sex couples to be baptized so long as there is a, quote, well-founded hope that it would be educated in the Catholic religion. This came from Reuters. We all know who this man is, but Father James Martin, he says, this is an important step forward in the church, seeing transgender people not only as people in a church where some say they don't really exist, but as Catholics. Father James Martin, a prominent Jesuit priest and supporter of LGBT rights in the church, said on X, formerly as Twitter. Francis has met with transgender people, and in July, he told a transgender person, even if we're sinners, God draws near to help us. The Lord loves us as we are. This is God's crazy love. You know what? I'll leave the rest. If you want to read it, you can go to nftu.net and you can read that. Kind of a shock. I mean, in a way, it's not a shock, but it's not a shock that they're doing it. It's a shock that they're kind of just publicly just like, here you go. Yep. Let's take in all the transgenders. I have no idea what to make of that. And then,
I believe it's Saint Augustine who says that we don't love sinners for their sins,
Right.
or as the capacity of sinners. That's not why. I mean, that that's kind of a misunderstanding. Um, we desire people to change, and his view is sort of like, no, you can be like a mass murderer, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, that's the same logic. What would be the difference? So, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, um, this was kind of a big shock. Just as I mentioned, it popped out today. I'm sure that the professional excuse makers over at Apologetics Inc. are going to find some way to spin this. I have no idea how. This takes things to a whole new level in terms of the Vatican's approval of sodomy. I did note in the article, of course, that Archbishop Elpidopoulos of the Greek Archdiocese here is ahead of the curve because he already did the baptizing an adopted baby of a same-sex couple like last year.
Well, you have to remember, this is basically the institution that conservative RC apologists say you have to be part of the church. And
Exactly.
in fact, the Vatican has done far more to delegitimize all the distinctive claims of the Vatican that make it, like, say, different from Orthodoxy than we ever could. You remember a few years ago when Pope Francis said that the Roman Catholics are not allowed to try to convert Orthodox, and I remember that on when that happened, and all the RC apologists on Facebook, for example, had to find
like
some way to explain it, and they couldn't. So, but that's also because the Vatican. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You were saying.
Yeah. So, obviously, this is absurd. There's no reason. I mean, I have respect for individual Roman Catholics who run like pro-life organizations and things like that.
Yeah.
Who oftentimes don't even like what's happening on this front.
They operate in spite of the Pope.
Yes. In fact, yes. Remember when they did the abortion legalization movement in Ireland? The Vatican basically didn't help them. In fact, it hampered the pro-life movement in Ireland. They're not really. I mean, every now and again, Pope Francis will come out and say, "Oh, he's against abortion." I mean, just almost like pro forma. But then he'll appoint like an abortion doctor to the Pontifical Academy of Life, saying that they need two different perspectives. That's obviously sabotage from within. So go ahead.
So really, yeah, I mean, it's ultimately, I think that this is going to just speed down the spiral of what is happening to the Roman Catholic Church as it implodes and basically becomes a large property management organization.
Like the Episcopal Church. That's what the Episcopal Church in the United States is, essentially.
Yeah. And so it's pretty sad I feel bad for the people who really believed in this stuff. I mean, and still believe in this stuff. I mean, I have family who are Roman Catholic. How do you explain? I mean, granted, a lot of them have already been heavily liberalized by, the state anyway. So to that end, it's like, to them, it's just going with the flow, which is even more embarrassing. Okay.
But of course, you have the same phenomena as you mentioned in World Orthodoxy.
Yeah, absolutely. They're being handed the program. They have to do the exact same things, and so that's unfortunate, to say the least.
Well, the fortunate part about it, or the good thing about it, is that they can't. The more they are open about this, the more people who have a conscience and have principles know that they can't stay where they are. If you know what I mean. That gives, for example, Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew and Patriarch Kirill, for example, in another way, are the best recruiting tools for true Orthodoxy, right? Because their actions and their words and their policies contradict everything that many of these officialdom fighting from within people try to say is actual. Oh, it didn't actually happen. Well, then they kind of contradict you and say, no, they did say that. All right. So at that point, it causes people to make a choice. Are they going to be with these institutions that have adopted these policies that are fundamentally contrary to all traditional Christian norms, or are they going to be with the church? So, okay. Oh, I guess Father Joseph dropped out of the chat. Well, I don't know what to say. So I am going to close this down, and if Father Joseph wants to restart it, then he can. Okay. Bye.
Okay, back. One moment. Okay, one moment here. I'm just gonna put that here, and I'm gonna close that. That was weird. I'm not sure if this may have been. I have not quite explained to Bishop Enoch what had occurred beforehand, so I will wait. Yes, we are so back. Thank you, and we survived. That's the key here. And there's Vladika. Okay, let's add him on. Okay, Benedicite, we are back. This may be due to enraged David Erhan fans who cut my power. I will explain that. That's kind of a weird thing. Before you came on, like right before you came on, I had lost my patience with it. But it turns out that there was a live stream of Father Peter Heers talking to David Erhan at the same time as we started. So what I did, because I didn't have a co-host and because I wasn't sure what to do, and I want to just experiment. I actually was live reviewing their live stream live, and so that's why, once we got off that, and then you came on and we started talking, and then, I assume trolls destroyed the internet. No, that's really not. It's just my cable company's terrible. It's a joke. Honestly, that would be funny if enraged David Erhan fans came and destroyed my internet, but, that would be. I imagine they wouldn't stop at the internet if they got that far. But,
so what other topics are there to talk about?
Okay, so we covered the Roman Catholic thing, and that ended ever so abruptly. Then the other thing I wanted to talk about real quick was again I wanted to talk about like these Western Rite prayer books that I received in the mail, and so I will show them here. To one of they're kind of redundant, and I'll explain why. One of them was this St. Coleman prayer book, which is by this Father Michael Wood. And the other one was the Liturgy of St. John the Divine, which is actually in the St. Coleman prayer book, so you don't need it. Am I recommending these by holding these up? No, I'm telling you what to avoid. You do not want to purchase this stuff, and I'm going to tell you why. The Liturgy of St. John the Divine, by the way, if you look at the, I don't know, did I send you the file, Vladika, for the St. Coleman book from 2008?
No, can you put it up on the screen?
I can do that. Let me get it over to. I can put it up on the screen. But this is gonna. Let's do that. Let me see here. Let me open it up somewhere in a PDF viewer, and just get that ready. But yeah, this has been moving pretty quick today. Let me see here. Downloads. There we go. Okay, so let's move it over here. This is one of the most strangely. Okay, I'm gonna share it. 1 second. I always press the wrong button. Okay, present, share screen, window. There we go. All right, so this is what is known as the Shorter St. Coleman Prayer Book. Shout out to one of our supporters who actually sent me this copy of the PDF. This one, as you will noted, is dated 2008, whereas the edition I'm dealing with is 2022. But here's what's going to be really cool about this. You're going to notice right off the bat the bait and switch. And what I'm going to tell you right now, and this is why the whole St. John the Divine Liturgy, in the 2008 version of this prayer book, this is the introduction from Metropolitan Hilarion, who was then Archbishop Hilarion back then. He just reuses the same introduction over and over. Now, as we get to the kind of the table of contents, you'll notice that it says here the Divine Liturgy English and the Divine Liturgy
prayer book. It says it looks kind of like a rituale from the table of contents. Yeah,
pretty much. It's closer to a ritual. But in any case, this has notes regarding the Sarum liturgy, and then it has later on it has notes regarding the English liturgy. And the English liturgy basically is based upon the Anglican prayer book. But in this version, the 2022 version, because of the fact that so many people were complaining about that, they had to hide it. and so they put it here, and I'm going to see if let me just see if I can just
okay.
take this
So
off the screen
one
for
of
a
the
second.
problems here, if you note, he says notes regarding the English liturgy,
Mm-hmm.
and in the second paragraph he says those guidelines referring to the 1904, 1905 observations on the Russian observations on the prayer book, which was prepared by a committee in Petrograd, St. Petersburg, I believe.
Yep.
It says those guidelines have been here applied. I'll turn my fan off. Those guidelines have here been applied to the liturgies of 1549 and 1718, themselves both truncated versions of the Sarum original, and here including much of the Sarum canon. Now, when he says 1549, he's talking, that's the first prayer book of Edward VI. That's the first Book of Common Prayer. 1718, that I think is a reference to the non-juror liturgy composed by the Anglican non-jurors in 1718 during the usages controversy. That's this sort of obscure point of Anglican history, though it wasn't obscure at the time. So I should point out that I am not sure if it's correct to call. In fact, I do not believe it is at all correct to refer to the 1549 prayer Book of Common Prayer, which is admittedly not as bad as the later versions, I guess you can say, but it's still a Protestant text, a truncated version of the Sarum text, because the canon, the Eucharistic canon they have, is basically a combination of Protestant mutilation of the Roman canon, or Sarum canon, if he uses the phrases, the Roman canon, and just inventions of their own on their own part. And for example, they abolished the gradual, the Alleluia, the sequence, the tract in that text as well. I think they abolished the communion antiphon. The offertory was abolished. Now, it's true when they first tried to introduce the Anglican prayer book, the Protestant prayer book in 1549, a large portion of the English Roman Catholic clergy rejected it, but many of them tried to use it and just use old Sarum Rite books to meld with it. But that was formally condemned. All right, that wasn't what they were supposed to be doing technically. So it wasn't like they intended that to be done. So I simply, that in the 1718 text is an attempt to take the 49 prayer book, and I think they added things from like the Liturgy of St. James and the liturgy from the Apostolic Constitutions, because a lot of those older High Church Anglicans sort of were more interested in like the so-called Clementine liturgy and the Liturgy of St. James and the Apostolic Constitutions, and combining that with the Protestant text. So, I think that's not, in fact, very accurate statement at all to make about it. He says, ideally, the memorials ought to be placed after the Sursum Corda sequence, immediately before the prayer, which begins, "All glory be to the Almighty God," as this would reflect the correct liturgical order. However, this was not allowed for in the 1907 guidelines. And therefore, he's referring again to the prayer. I think the prayer, they call it the prayer for the whole estate of Christ Church, that the Protestant forces created and put into their own version of the canon. Of course, it's not really the canon of the Mass. We shouldn't even call it that. Though later in the 1552 prayer book, they kind of distorted it. So it just seems to me very strange, this continuous attempt to sort of say that the Anglican Book of Common Prayer, which, by the way, people died in England.
This is a
people who were pre-Reformation, who grew up using like the Hereford Rite or the Sarum Rite or the York Rite or what have you. They were like hung or killed because they simply did not. They knew the Protestant prayer book was not the old religion. All right, and they had to terrorize the country for years and trying to even enforce the 1559 prayer book thereafter under Elizabeth. So it's to me again, it's to say that although they accepted it, well, I mean, I guess they were going to be executed, and so there's sort of this history that's not being talked about, that they went around destroying relics of saints, The liturgical ordo was completely destroyed. That had existed even after, even before, even of course. I mean, it was separated from the church after the Great Schism and such. But that's basic liturgical ordo had existed in Britain even before the time of St. Augustine. All right, going back to the Celtic churches. Okay, so I don't know. Again, there's this strange obsession with the Book of Common Prayer, maybe because some of the prose. I mean, some of the prose is not terrible, but a good prosaic composition does not alone make something suitable for worship in the church.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's simply not a proper way to look at the material. I mean, we could, if you wanted to, we could do a whole episode. I could just pull up the 1549 prayer book, 1550, 15. I could go through the entire text, and I can point out large numbers of differences between that and the old pre-Reformation rite, which is substantially the same in most areas to the pre-Schism rite, except for certain major points.
Well, I will say this.
But to me, again, it's continuously strange and annoying. Considering the history of the Reformation ending in England. And I was just reading today a text by Archbishop Seraphim Sobolev, who wrote a book, a little like booklet, called on the question of the union between the Anglican and Orthodox churches.
Oh, I remember that one.
And he goes through it, and he basically he knew a lot more than a lot of people give him credit for, and he points out that when Anglicans had conferences with the Orthodox in the 1890s or something like that, they'd always end up saying that they agreed with the Orthodox. But then when they would hold conferences with like Lutherans, they'd always end up saying they agreed with the Lutherans. All right, well that can't be. There's something going on here. But I can't remember what it was. Archbishop Seraphim made several significant points. There's everything from the fact that, anyway, I don't want to get too far off, but I would recommend people read that text if they're interested in that question.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I will point out here is that, as I mentioned, the text I have is a 2022 edition. So this set of notes is actually not in the newer work. It's actually replaced, because I presume that the Liturgy of St. Theodore is, in fact, the English, the prayer book liturgy. And I think I went through the pages with you. And the notes on that are much shorter. It literally just says, and we can check the accuracy here. This is the liturgy which developed through the first millennium in the British Isles. The British Church claimed that it originated from a letter sent them by St. John the Divine from... Oh, no, this is for the Stowe Missal. It's even worse. Regarding the St. Theodore liturgy, he wrote, essentially, this is little different from Sarum, from which it directly derives, with input from the 1549 and non-juring work. The ceremonial is identical. It's intended to implement the spirit of the 1907 Moscow Synod critique of the Book of Common Prayer. That's it. That's all it has. Like the whole thing.
That's the note on the Stowe text. It says.
No. I haven't gotten to the Stowe text. No, that's the note on the St. Theodore text or the prayer book text.
Well, that's not accurate. From what I remembered you showing me of the text, because I don't have this, of the so-called Liturgy of St. Theodore that Father Michael invented.
It is the English liturgy we're looking at right now.
It's just an adapted Anglican service. Sometimes they called that the Anglican Missal, or the English Missal, or the American Missal, when they took the older Reformation or Tridentine texts in many cases and kind of forced them into a prayer book. Percy Dearmer was sort of involved in this in the late 1800s. There were several others, who tried to do that.
Right, but
ultimately it was simply not something that was not going to mesh.
Yeah, it's going to get worse.
And St. Theodore of Canterbury did not write the Anglican Book of Common Prayer.
Obviously, no.
That simply did not. He used the Roman Mass, as was practiced in the 7th century.
Again, Reader John, thank you for that. We do appreciate donations, and we do need them. It's going to... Things are always moving forward. But wait, I want to get to the St. John the Divine one. You're going to love this.
Okay.
This is the notes regarding the Liturgy of St. John the Divine, which is not in the 2008 edition. This is the liturgy that first developed through the first millennium in the British Isles. The British Church claimed that it originated from a letter sent them by St. John the Divine from Ephesus, circa AD 980 to 90. The present version is a translation done by Dr. West of Oxford from the quote-unquote Stowe Missal. That book is dated as being commenced circa AD 600 with its last alteration circa AD 900. It is therefore a Holy Orthodox liturgy and is thought to have continued in use by British refugees from the Norman invasion under Constantinople until around AD 1550 to 1600. The ceremonial should be as for Sarum.
Well, here's the thing: if they have material about that, I'd be interested in it. I've never heard that. I would like to see. I'm not trying to make it. I'm not being funny. If they have material like that, that'd be great.
That's my point. That's my point. You would think that if
that would be a major discovery that you need to share with people.
But that's my point. It's such a huge discovery that it's impossible to accept. This is basically saying this claim is British refugees from the Norman invasion in the 11th century were there for 400 years in Constantinople doing the Stowe liturgy.
Well, it sounds to me what they're probably referring to are the Anglo-Saxon refugees who would not have regarded themselves as British, by the way.
I'm just saying what it said. It says British
refugees. The Anglo-Saxon refugees who I believe left after there was a rising in the north in 1070 or so. There was this one great rising by the Old English nobles and thanes and people against the Normans. They fell. There was the harrowing of the north. And I think a large portion of them did leave on ships. And they ended up showing up. They did show up at Constantinople sometime, I think, the 1080s or something. And they showed up just in time to actually prevent part of the city from, not the city from falling, but part of the Byzantine army from being destroyed. These hundreds of English ships, Anglo-Saxon ships showed up. And I think either fought the Normans who were attacking or fought the Turks or something. And what I do recall happened is the Byzantine government gave them leave to settle up on parts of the Black Sea. You know how the Black Sea connects to parts of the Caucasus?
Yeah.
There was somewhere they did settle up there. All right. But we don't really know a lot more information. I think there are some few references to that.
But they weren't doing the Celtic Missal anyway.
No, they would have. In fact, they actually got they have bishops sent them from Hungary and such. So, no, I don't think there's any evidence that they were doing that. To be honest, So when they speak about Dr. West's translations, okay, that's fine. He did a translation. I'm not saying that's bad, and I'm not attacking the Stowe Missal. It's not really a missal, by the way. In fact, he seems to have, from what you say, put it into quotation marks, which is good, actually. Because it's really a mass book with a few mass proffers. It doesn't have a lectionary in it. I think it has a service for baptism and chrismation in it, for communion of the sick.
Yeah.
Maybe a few other texts. It was for a priest to travel around with somewhere in northern Britain or something. But I know what letter they're talking about. I would like to supposedly St. John sending to Britain in the first century. I'd have to have more information. That almost sounds like something someone half remembered from that was said at the Synod of Whitby when they had the debate about how to do the tonsure and how to calculate Pascha, and some of the northern British or northern Celtic clergy and some of the Saxons who had gone along with it argued that their tradition came from St. John about how to celebrate Pascha, and I think the opposite side argued that their tradition came from St. Peter. All right. That's the Orthodox way to celebrate Pascha. And the king was well, then St. Peter was, a more important disciple than St. John. We're going to go with that. But I don't know what letter they're specifically referencing, other than maybe some half-remembered material from Whitby or something like that. And, of course, Whitby is a point in which some extreme Celticists, and I'm not attacking Celticists, but some extreme Celticists will use to and Mullerine Dowling was unfortunately one of those, even though he did some interesting work.
Yeah, he was very.
Yes,
he did a lot of good work.
I think he was a serious person, even though I disagree with him on many points.
Yeah.
That they would say sort of Whitby was the point in which the sort of heresy gradually began to filter in. But that would be odd because they simply were reasserting the canonical date for Pascha. That was it was simply being done at Whitby in 664, I believe. And remember, Ireland, most of Ireland at the Synod of Magdalene, like in the 620s, had actually accepted the corrected Paschal calculation date. Because just for reference, what had happened is that contact had been cut off with Alexandria. People sort of had to prepare their own Paschal calculation tables. And they were using oftentimes old recycled cycles, which didn't get updated. But in regards to the Celtic Rite, if you read any material on that, it's not entirely clear. And for example, we have a Father Felix in Britain who did a video in England, in Scotland, who did a video on this. He talked
on the Diverse Other Monks channel.
Yes, and it's like he did a very good. It was last year a very good video about the problems with this claim that the Celtic Rite was like this universal thing done by all the Celtic churches and all where in Anglo-Saxon England, et cetera, et cetera. Because remember, you're going to when you look at the Celtic Rite, there really isn't a lot of material,
right?
And I suspect that's because not that people destroyed it, but that it wasn't really a rite in the way we think of a rite. All right, like the Ambrosian Rite or the Mozarabic Rite.
It wasn't a specific use. Yeah. It was just kind of.
I think it was. I think they were usages. All right, but within the same general Western Roman Rite. Because remember, there's some. I believe there were some early medieval texts, Irish texts. I'd have to pull them up now. Maybe from the Irish tracts from the Mass or something like that. That say during the time of the Second Order of Irish Saints, Ireland accepted the Roman canon. Various changes happened to them. If anything, the older Celtic liturgy prior to the introduction of the Roman canon and Roman features via Britain would have been something like the Gallican liturgy or thereafter and such. But I just think there's just too much of of overemphasis on this subject. So we could talk more about it if you put the text up or what have you, or whatever you want to do, Father.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I just wanted to kind of give an overview as to why this particular book is not trustworthy in terms of what you were talking about with Western Rite usages. The stuff that we do in our synod, quite simply, is heavily researched and documented. It's not based upon legends and or what's the word I'm looking for? Conjectures. Yeah, conjecture, speculation, etc. So, I mean, I think that was good for a general warning, just because if you know the origin of a text, you know what the text is about.
Because anything that's going to use liturgical prayers invented by the Protestant reformers, which is the prayer book, that's not going to be acceptable.
Yeah,
I mean, when I make critiques of the so-called liturgy of St. John Divine with Stowe Missal, I'm not really attacking it. I'm just saying that there are problems with trying to claim you're reconstructing it because you don't have the necessary source material, unless you do what I claim, which is simply say it was a usage of the Western Roman Rite, and therefore it's lecture. You don't have to research the lectionary because it was the same lectionary as everything else. Everyone else was using.
Right? And this was one of the problems that Mulroon Dowling himself had as he tried to put together services. He basically had to continually import and take other things, and ultimately,
and this ultimately also makes Western Orthodox Christians Western Orthodox Christians look bad, because people say, "Oh, look at this guy. He says he doesn't know what to do. He just had to mishmash stuff together." And they're really talking about the people who were interested in that type of project. All right, for better or worse, whether you like it or not, that's that issue. That's not our problem. All right.
Yeah.
We have probably 5,000 sacramentaries that can be dated before 1000 AD of the Western Roman usages. All right.
Yeah.
We have hundreds of antiphonariys, graduals, cantatoriums, ordines, lectionaries, gospel books, commentaries. I mean, it's extremely probably the most well-documented liturgical rite in Christian history before the year 1000 AD is what we would call is the Western Roman Rite. All right. We have material going back, manuscript material going back to 600 AD or 550.
Yeah.
Right? And when I say that, people may say, what about the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom? Well, yeah, but remember the first manuscript of that is 800 AD.
Yeah,
I'm
no, I
saying
know.
it's just prior, just
yeah,
like I can tell you, Saint Leo the Great was doing something similar to the Roman Mass, basically. Even though the first manuscript, like the Leonine Sacramentary, comes from 550 to 600. Okay,
yeah.
because they were copying the text. So in other words, there's anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. I'm saying we
Yeah,
did.
no,
We
I
did
get
this recently,
completely.
so
Yeah,
it
it's
becomes a little irritating to hear people say either it's fragmentary when they're talking about having fights with these other people, or maybe they pick those people to have disputes with because they know that they have real problems and they can sort of reimpose that scheme onto us. If you know what I'm trying to say.
Well, yeah, but more importantly, and this is what I'm trying to get at, is that ultimately this has a Pied Piper effect, where you have, random renegades who put together some sort of fantasy book based on conjectures, and then they say, "Well, this is Western Orthodoxy." Then we have to deal with it. It becomes like very difficult. So again, the St. Coleman book, I'll flat out say, outside of its Sarum liturgy, which we haven't even looked at, a lot of it is just Protestant prayers. It's not worth getting.
No, I haven't looked at the baptismal office, so I don't know what exactly they're doing for the baptismal rite in it. So I can't.
I don't even. Do you want me to look at it? I mean,
sure,
I don't really
you can
want
go to that. I mean, if you want to.
I mean, okay, yeah, that's no problem. Hold on, give me a moment.
Because I don't want to look. I want to be fair. I don't want to say,
Okay, yeah, we'll be fair as we can. Give me one moment. Let me see here what page that would be. Where is it? Plus, there we go. 74. Okay, so let's get to 74. Now, keep in mind this is a 2008 edition, so we're going to follow along.
I can't see it.
Yeah, I'll do that right now. Whoop, hit the wrong button again, and give me a moment. And window. Okay. And let me see here. We are on page 83. So let's go.
Okay, no. Wait. Go up.
What?
Go up. Go up.
Why?
Please go up.
I'm going up. Okay.
No, the part where it said the Great Litany. Go down. Go down the page. Go down the page. Okay, stop.
Oh, Reader John asks, doesn't the author have a questionable past? Yes.
Father Michael is no longer with ROCOR MP. No one knows who he's with at this point.
Yeah, he's just selling books now.
I think he was suspended because when they had that rebellion among the Moscow, the ROCOR clergy in Great Britain, he went along with it. It didn't work out too well for him.
All right, where's the thing?
Okay, you're going too fast, Father. It's very difficult for me to see what's happening. I don't even know where we're at. We're at
a burial.
Okay, this is Terce. Okay, go down. Go past Terce. I don't even know what I. Okay. Okay.
Still Terce.
Wait, whoa. Go up, Father. Go up. Go up again. Okay, stop here. Okay, so that's a burial service. Go down. What's happened is that the left side is page 1. There's problems with the pagination. The left side says page 85. This is page 6. So we need to ignore the left side because that's, for whatever reason, that's happening. Okay, just continue scrolling down, and I just need to learn to look on the right side.
Well, it switches from each page to each page.
Okay, so it says Great Litany right there. Go down.
Where?
Right there. Uh-huh. Okay, let's look at this. Kyrie eleison. Okay. Go down to the next page. Page 9. Okay, there it is. Page 9 again. Okay, just making sure that they have the invocation of the saints, because most times Anglicans don't. It looks like some of the petitions may be Anglican from the Litany of the Saints. Okay. Something's wrong with the pagination, because suddenly there's the baptism office right there, Father. It's like out of nowhere.
Yeah, because it looks like this appears to be kind of like set up for printing, so that it has a kind of.
Okay, yeah. Go up again. Can you just, when you go up, Father, can you just use your keyboard to go up instead of the scrolling? Because that goes up a little bit slower. I have a better time. That looks like it's. I'm trying to see where the baptism office begins. That's what I'm trying to see.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's very difficult to find out what page it begins on.
Okay, I think I have an idea of how to do this one because it's 76. So 75. Here we go.
Okay.
Make it bigger.
Okay.
I think I figured out how to navigate this thing. So
Okay, scroll down. I mean, go down.
okay, I think you're going to mean go up because then the next page is over here.
Well, it's obviously it's going to be too complicated.
No, I think I got it.
Okay,
Right,
so I mean, again, obviously, it looks like maybe he is using the Stowe baptismal office. Okay, that's all right. Okay.
Here. And then the next one, we move to this side. Okay.
Okay, so there's there's one of the liturgies they're giving.
Okay. That's let me see here. This is I think this one might be the serum. Yeah, this is the serum one.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think the serum one's going to be fine because I don't even think he wrote that. He did that one. He just took it from another.
No, this something strange here. There's the Protestant hymn, "Holy, Holy, Holy, Lord God Almighty." Now they can claim they translated that from something else, but okay. Go down again. Good night.
Okay. Let me see here. Okay, so serum. So then we go back
to
to
the left.
here.
Go to the left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go down again. Again.
Okay.
Epistle, gradual. Okay, gospel. Go down. Keep on. Offertory. Procession. Yeah, it says serum. So, okay. All right. Okay, so let me see if it has the Roman. Yeah, it has the Roman canon of the Mass. Okay, so that's not really that's not a big deal. Okay,
right now the bigger concern is the not the serum one, but the other one, and I want to see if I can get to it. Trying to figure this one out is really a pain because of these alternating pages. Okay, what is this? Uh-huh. Okay, that's I guess the Roman canon.
No, wait. Okay, source on Corda. Go down. Okay. Part of the offertory. Go down.
Oh, here's the English liturgy. This is what would become the liturgy of Saint Theodore. Okay, so we know it's on that page.
They start with matins, but it looks like it's matins maybe from. Yeah, it looks like it's maybe matins from the prayer book. Adapted.
Okay. So this is basically the Anglican thing. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's continue on. Yeah, there's a lot. It's kind of confusing, but I have figured this out. Okay, so let's say any kind of danger. Vesting office. Okay. Come Holy Ghost. Okay, and this is where their liturgy would start. Psalm 51. I don't know why they even do this.
I'm not quite aware either. I mean, maybe there were someplace, but I've just not seen it.
All right, so.
Okay. Confiteor, okay. Then after the Confiteor, then there's that's for some reason he's got that Anglican hymn in there for the entrance. There doesn't seem to be any reference to the introit. I can't see it if there is.
Let me check. Give me a moment. I don't.
Okay, so it says he just say the office. Then shall the choir repeat the office of the day. Then there's an entrance hymn. Although technically the office for the introit is supposed to be the entrance.
Yeah.
Where anyway.
Okay. Let me see.
Okay, Gloria, Collex, Epistle, Gradual, Gospel, Credo. Okay. Okay, so I can tell you that's already part of that right there is the Anglican Eucharistic prayer.
Okay, so this is the Anglican prayer.
Yes.
All right.
It looks like they have done they've mended parts of it, put a reference to Melchizedek in it, and referenced So okay. All right, so that's what we thought it was going to be anyway. All right.
Yeah, pretty much. And just to, I'm going to double confirm it, but I'm pretty sure that that's the same exact text.
If somebody is interested in reading the history of the Book of Common Prayer from a perspective that's not, that I actually think is actually fair to Anglicanism, even though doesn't come to friendly conclusions. The interesting book would be Michael Davies' Liturgical Revolution series.
Oh, yeah.
He was a traditionalist Roman Catholic, but he wrote a book called Cranmer's Godly Order. And there's also Eamon Duffy's 1,200-page book, Stripping of the Altars. And both of those texts go through exactly what they had to do to England to impose the Protestant Book of Common Prayer on the country. And it was not an easy transition for that population. There was the Pilgrimage of Grace at one point. There was the rebellion in Wales where they tried to impose the Book of Common Prayer. And initially, the English government thought, they just want the Protestant prayer book in Welsh. And they translated the Welsh, and they were like, this is even worse because now we can understand what's being said. So
yeah,
because then they understood even more clearly what was the heretical content of it. And then even by 1550s, 60s, by 1570s, the last of the even Protestant bishops in Anglicanism that had a belief in an objective real presence had been exposed. Because I think Edmund Gester was the last, was sort of held Lutheran views, and he was gotten rid of, and even look, you go into 1600s. I think people have a misunderstanding about when they say Anglicanism in the 1600s or 1500s, and they sort of think of it as post Oxford's movement, post Tractarian and ritualist Anglicanism, where all the Anglicans clergy wear chasubles and what have you. There was not a chasuble seen in an Anglican church as a rule from the 1570 or so on unto probably 1855.
Wow.
Because if you did wear a chasuble, you'd be put in prison. All right. And during the Reformation, the Anglican clergy, the Anglican officials, barely could be convinced to keep the surplice, which is simply a simple vestment used by anybody who has clerical orders. Because originally they wanted to just keep only have the Geneva gown. They had this. They moved the communion table right into the in front of the choir, or even into the middle of the church. So everybody around the communion table. That only changed during the early 1600s due to Laud and a few others. But even figures like John Coaston and Laud, or Lancelot Andrewes, for which the Antiochians have created a publishing house, I believe, dedicated to him.
Yeah, in his honor.
They tend to forget that those figures still identified as Protestants. Now, they may have been more liturgical Protestants. They may have had a higher sacramentalist view, somewhere above Calvin's, maybe near Luther's in some issues and what have you. But many of them did not necessarily believe in, whether it was Hooker or Laud and others, did not necessarily believe that the episcopacy, apostolic succession, was necessary. All right. They just thought, bishops are for the good order of the church, and the Presbyterians have valid orders or something. So and that's a point that Archbishop Seraphim Sobolev in his work points out, because that goes back to the whole William Barlow question about, he was the one that made Matthew Parker the first Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury, and it turns out there's no consecration certificate for Barlow, and then Barlow later said, the king can just appoint me a bishop, and that's because he had a Protestant concept of holy orders. So, I'm sure there were a lot of people in Anglicanism in the 1600s who began to read, and that did happen, began to read the Church Fathers, and they began to realize, look, there were problems with the Reformation and what have you. But even when you get to the non-jurors, which he's referencing in 1718, even to the most extreme of the non-jurors, which was like Thomas Deacon in the 1750s, none of them ever, the vast majority would not even admit you could do petition to the saints in the litany, where you could pray to the saints. They always were condemnatory toward transubstantiation. They had sort of an instrumentalist, a virtualist view of the Eucharist, where there's like sort of this ghostly presence of the body and blood of Christ, but ghostly means sort of almost like a mist that's transmitted to you. It's very, very odd view of the Eucharist, it's just you have to get out of this mentality of assuming Anglicanism, as it looked in like some high church Anglo-Catholic parish in 1890, was somehow normative before 1850. That's all stuff that the Tractarians and the Oxford movement and the ritualists basically tried to revive in the Protestant Church of England in that period. And they did revive some of it, but the adoption of the chasuble didn't turn the average Anglican minister into believing the Mass, the communion service was the Eucharistic sacrifice, identical in essence to Calvary, although and such.
Right.
They just have the Lutheran concept adopted, where chasubles are nice because they add effect to the church services or something like that. So, and that's the point Archbishop Seraphim makes and others that about Anglicanism. You can have many people who might personally hold positions identical to Orthodox, but why are they in Anglicanism then? All right, what they have this that was the point Dr. Overbeck also made. Which is why they hated Overbeck, because Overbeck would be at conferences and he'd say, look, you need to all become Orthodox. All right. This remaining in the Anglican Church to try to make it Orthodox, that's not going to work. You have to consider your own personal salvation first. If your fellow clergy and people around you aren't going to go with you, all right, you cannot on the last day of judgment say that, well, I knew the truth, but the guy who I thought was my bishop, I couldn't convince him, so I just stayed in heresy with him.
This is an interesting question from reader John. He says, "How much of a debt does Western Rite owe to J.J. Overbeck?"
That
depends
right.
on who you ask.
There will be no W in right there, by the way.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what
I think ideologically it owes a lot.
Yeah,
although
I would say the existence of the current existence of how our synod operates and thinks in terms of Western Rite is largely based upon the
problems if you're going to find problems in Overbeck, they're generally problems he had that were no different than that existed in the Russian Church, because generally you have people say that he had like scholastic views of that's always an accusation, quote unquote, scholastic views, which Archbishop Seraphim, by the way, talked about. Anyway, anything like that.
He didn't sound any different than any other Orthodox at the time.
Yes, well, he sounded different in the sense that he knew what was the sort of the Masonic and a liberal plan. Yeah, and so did other Orthodox, but he was much more acutely aware of it than many others, and he knew Protestantism and Anglicanism in and out. All right, he'd studied them in depth. So it was that was why when they tried to have like the Bonn Conference in 1877, which is you had the nascent Old Catholic movement and there was this real hope that the Old Catholics would unite to the Orthodox Church. So they dropped the filioque, they'd give up like unleavened bread, they would be allowed to keep those, and that was Overbeck was like really hopeful, and so were a lot of other people in the Russian Church.
Until they invited the Anglicans.
Well, what happened is the ecumenical patriarch invited the Anglicans. They were not supposed to even be there, because remember the Church of Constantinople basically had two sources of main funding exterior to itself: the Russian Church and the British government, and various English donors. So when they had the Bonn Conference, the original plan was that the Russian Orthodox Church representatives would meet with the nascent Old Catholic hierarchy. They would present orthodoxy to them. They felt that there was at least a good chance, a reasonable chance, that they could convince them to accept orthodoxy, because at that point, remember, they're in a no man's land, all right? The Utrecht was, all right, because Utrecht wasn't willing to claim it was the only true church left on earth. They weren't willing to become sedevacantists in that sense. You know what I mean? So then where do they go? Well, they have no choice but to go either to be consistent in Orthodox direction. Well, I think various Anglican representatives are invited. I think Dr. Littledale showed up, who was vociferously opposed to the Seventh Ecumenical Council.
Well, one thing to keep in mind.
So Littledale provided cover, even though the Old Catholics accepted veneration of images. Littledale provided significant cover to try to justify the filioque. right?
Yeah.
And this created, significant problems at the conference. I think by 1879, the Old Catholics had agreed that they did drop the filioque from the creed, and there were a few other things they did. But again, their problem was that they were under significant influence, on the one hand, from nascent modernism that was being kicked out of Roman Catholicism and was trying to find a place to go hide out in. All right. And the other was a deleterious ecclesial influence via Anglicanism. And these sort of counteracted the influence that Orthodoxy was having upon those institutions.
Well, it's worth noting, and I just want to point this out real quick, because if we remember that the Ecumenical Patriarchate had taken in a Father James Chistel, or Chistel from the Anglicans, and had simply taken him in. I believe he remarried, and they just basically kind of took him in his orders without even reordaining him. He was a primary opponent of Overbeck at this time, so it's important to remember that, and when we think about this period, because we're looking at it from the period in England, but this is also the period where St. Nectarius of Aegina is being persecuted. These are things happening. These are right before the, right, we're seeing the first steps of revolution in Russia. So this is a very chaotic period where it kind of looked like there was a hope for that scheme, but for recreating the Western Rite in the way Dr. Overbeck prescribed. But frankly, everything was going into chaos at that point.
Well, Overbeck
basically was.
By the 1889 or 1890, Overbeck's view on the Old Catholic question was that you're going to find individual priests and communities you can take in, but as a whole, Utrecht doesn't seem to be wanting to really move in any other direction.
Yeah.
In concord with what you mentioned, remember, it was in 1879 and then again in 1881 that the Ecumenical Patriarch had made a decision where it claimed that Armenians who were not part of the Orthodox Church, if they didn't have access to their own priest, could take communion from an Orthodox priest. Now, the excuse given was that the Armenian church at the time was not in communion with any of the other monophysites, and they had made some sort of vague declaration that they didn't consider council an obstacle to the church. All right. Which, of course, none of those would be sufficient justification for saying that people, Armenian monophysites, even if they're not monophysites and they're schism from other monophysites, can take communion in the church. And those were decisions, I believe, reached under Joachim III, who is sort of the notorious recurring figure in the ecumenical. He was a Freemason, by the way. I don't know how much they knew about it at the time. Notorious recurring figure. And even though the Russians generally were friendly to Joachim III, the Russian government, because they perceived him to be pro-Russian among the various, because this was during the time which every few years you'd have a new ecumenical patriarch, all right? And there'd be almost like a whole new synod of bishops. They just get rid of like half the bishops, all right? Because one faction was able to pay the Sultan enough money, and they could get rid of half the episcopate, and they'd be deposed, and then they'd come back and be undeposed a few years later, and such. So, so the Fanar, continued that, and then there were other problems. For example, there seemed to be some testimonial evidence from that the Serbian patriarch allowed Serbs who were studying in Switzerland to take communion like the old Catholic churches there. Because the old Catholics also at that point were oftentimes, again, even though they were not this, they were presenting themselves as sort of like the Western Orthodox Church that could become, or something like that. And there were various people in Russia who still thought that could happen. I mean, Overbeck ultimately was prescient, all right? He was a figure who could see sort of the writing on the wall and knew where this was where this was heading to begin with. He wasn't deceived by any of these platitudes that were being put forth by various, not heterodox figures. And I think his relationship with Joachim III had soured by the 1880s, which he initially had been on friendly terms with him because he had hoped that Joachim III back in 1870 or so would support Western Rite episcopacy in England being established. But as soon as the Church of England discovered that, and the British government, they paid substantial. They threatened they paid substantial amount of money to Athens and the Fanar, or they threatened to withdraw all funding from Athens and the Fanar if anything like that was allowed to go forward. So that's sort of, and then it killed it. Because remember, Overbeck had the other problem that he had been ordained in the Roman Catholic. He'd been ordained in the Roman Catholic Church. He left, he got married, and then he became Orthodox. All right, and the Russian Church at that time had a policy that they did not receive Roman Catholics by baptism or even chrismation, and if they believe, they would simply receive them by the Third Rite of Confession of Faith. So when Overbeck goes to the Fanar, Joachim's like, oh well, you can join us, and you will just rebaptize, rechristmate you, and reordain you. But this is a problem. Technically, Overbeck is a layperson, and he considers himself to be a member of the Russian Church. His spiritual father was the priest of the Russian embassy. So, what's he going to do? Is he going to go back and say to his spiritual father, "Look, I'm going to go to the Fanar and get rebaptized"? All right. Whether you agree with that or not. I mean, ultimately, that probably would have been destructive also, because who knows what they would have done to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
he
chose the right path, I think. So,
yeah. I noticed Breeder John's here. I was curious, did you have a question or comment?
I just want to kind of flesh out the thing with Overbeck. It's easier to do by jumping on here than trying to do autocorrect, and every time it does.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So I was just wondering. I think I read somewhere where Overbeck kind of soured some of the relationships with the Patriarch of Constantinople, because there was already kind of leanings toward recognizing the Anglicans.
Yeah,
and,
there was.
And Overbeck was like, well, yeah, but when they're talking about venerating saints, when they say that, they're not talking about in the way that the Orthodox mean it. And then he would flesh it out, and then it would really
he was a thorn in the side of many people.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Yeah, the EP definitely.
Remember, he was a professor of German, and I think maybe German literature at the Sandhurst, which is a British Royal, which is a military, a prestigious military. I think it was Sandhurst, which is the Royal Military Academy, and I think he had tenure, so they sort of couldn't fire him. I mean, they were. I mean, again, if they were going to go after Overbeck because he disliked Anglicanism, that they didn't go after Darwin that much, even though he was an atheist in positions and such. But that sort of helped him with his I guess he had a stable job or what have you. But no, your Reader John's absolutely correct. Just as Father Joseph mentioned, that he was not on friendly terms with Anglicanism. He may have had, I think he had friendly personal interactions with like individual Anglicans. All right, like he thought, look, you need to become Orthodox, et cetera, et cetera. And I think at one point he got something like 10,000 Anglicans and Roman Catholics in 1870 to sign a declaration saying that they wanted to have, they wanted the Orthodox patriarchates. This is Overbeck's problem at this point. He wanted the Orthodox patriarchates to establish a restored Western Rite Orthodox hierarchy in England. Well, Metropolitan Philaret of Dronsdorf from Moscow at that point said, look, this is not a good idea. You should have just brought this decision to the governing synod in St. Petersburg. Because as soon as you send this declaration to the Fanar and to Antioch and to everyone else, now they're involved in it.
Yep.
Right. Because of Metropolitan Philaret told him that they could have fixed the situation and made him got him in a priest, etc. They could have or at least just made priests and established some communities. But now you've revealed the plan to the Fanar, and they're going to tell it to they're going to tell this to the Anglicans, and that's going to essentially ruin it. Because at that point, Joachim or the Phanariates in Athens could have their strings pulled by foreign money, and they were already under heavy Masonic influence. And this is another point, by the way. Again, if you read Archbishop Seraphim Sobolev's text, he points this out, where he says that Masonic influence was very heavy in the Anglican Church at the time. I mean, it still is. But it was especially heavy in the late 19th, early 20th centuries. And Overbeck was sort of a continental German conservative. He was a German, but he moved to England, so he was not on friendly terms. Also, I mean, obviously those things sort of went together with being a traditional, like an Orthodox Christian. Okay, so he would not have been on friendly terms with Masonry, to say the least. Right, and Masons did not like that. So, because remember, this is one of the problems, obviously, because Masonry says you can have, Masonry would claim it's compatible with quote-unquote Christianity. Well, what it means is it's compatible with vague forms of Protestantism that believe in joint prayer between two different groups that have completely fundamentally different theological beliefs. And if you grew up in a low Protestant background, low Protestants, when I was growing up, we believed you could pray with almost anybody, even if who was even if somebody was not even a Christian, the pastor would say, well, we're going to pray with them and hopefully they'll accept the Lord or something like that. Which is kind of crazy. Not that they would accept the Lord, but that you could destroy these differences. So Masonry could sort of thrive in that environment. And unfortunately, Anglicanism, which had developed a comprehensive view of itself, where it had to include various different fundamentally contradictory theological beliefs, from Zwinglianism to, by the 1880s, Anglo-Catholicism or something like that. This was simply a breeding ground for that. And I'm not, again, trying to say that all Anglicans accepted Masonry, and there were many who didn't, et cetera, what have you. But this was just not a sustainable situation if you had, I believe, serious motivations about looking at the biblical, patristic, historical, canonical record about what a Christian should be, which is fundamentally going to ultimately lead you, if you are following that path consistently, to orthodoxy. All right, which would have just been considered orthodoxy in the 1800s, obviously. So,
would it be fair to say that Overbeck maybe naively was bumping heads with the people who were starting to antagonize the form of ecumenism that we know today?
Okay. Yeah, he was kind of like a proto.
I think he thought that the ecumenical patriarchate was his friend.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people thought the same thing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality was, it was ultimately going down this path even then, as a few things I've mentioned. And of course, the problem was that there was really, there doesn't seem, now I wonder how much of this was like widespread knowledge, if you know what I mean, among ecumenical, because when we say the ecumenical patriarchate today, we sort of think of like these 500 people living in Istanbul, and then like, people living in Australia and North America, the Greek archdiocese there. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's their main source of income and influence. I mean, they also get a lot of money laundered from the Democrats via Ukraine too. That's the other source of income they have.
Yeah.
So, and the archives. So, but when you talk about the ecumenical patriarch in the 1870s, they still had a substantial population in Asia Minor. It's a few million people. Mm-hmm. And I believe they had probably maybe 50, 60 eparchies, dioceses in Asia Minor where there were actually substantial communities in these cities. All right. So I don't know how widely it was known what was actually happening, though I suspect there were probably people in the top who knew what was happening, because remember, even if they weren't in the lower levels, because Masonic lodges began to open up in the Greek communities in the late 19th century in Asia Minor. Meletius Metaxicus. He was obviously a product of Metaxicus. It was a product of this Masonic lodge system, and so was Joachim III. That simply was not going to. Okay. Okay. Can you read that, Father?
Oh, I've considered doing a raid on the Fanar Watergate style to see what I could find. It's a pretty big complex. I don't know how well that would work out.
You got to know Greek too.
It might be a little trickier than you think. I did want to go back to this comment because we didn't talk about it. But
my point is that Reader John, you're right that he ran up against those people. His relationship with them began to sour. The Russian Church began to have more and more negative views toward the Fanar during this period, because remember, this is also during the period that for whatever problems the Bulgarians caused, and I'm not saying they weren't, the Fanar itself instigated the whole quote-unquote schism with the Bulgarians.
It just seemed.
Yes, and on the one hand, they would condemn them for philotism, but on the other hand, the Fanar would claim that the Greek race has the supremacy in the church, which they still claim even today. So this
puts them under their own anathema.
Exactly, and so you're right. I accept the anathema. That's great anathema that you can't just simply say one race gets to rule the whole church, all right? But then you're guilty of it as well. But the Phanariot way of looking at it is that's no, we don't fall under it because we're special. We're sort of like the exemption that proves the rule. And I'm not trying to use this to be negative toward Greek people, because there are a lot of obviously great real Orthodox Greek people who don't, generally are antagonistic to the ecumenical patriarchate for good reasons.
Now, I wanted to put back this comment because we didn't say much about it, but I think that there's a lot to it. And it pointed out, it said, Holy Transfiguration wrote, if you can baptize transgender, then you can ordain them. Women priests have arrived. Francis is pretty evil. At least his paymasters will be happy. Lord have mercy. I hadn't even considered that. I hadn't considered that if you can now baptize transgenders as their transgender form, then what's to stop a trans man, or that is a woman who is surgically pretending to be a man, from getting ordained a priest?
That's our
they could just pretend. Well, I'm assuming the vast majority of these women pretending to be men, they probably look, the surgeries to change their faces probably make them horrifically disfigured, I assume. So they don't look, maybe they look different. I don't know. But anyway,
I mean, well, I'm not looking at it from an aesthetic perspective. I see what you're saying, but I'm simply
could they
saying
recognize that this is actually a man, or is actually a woman? I'm sorry.
At which point do you now say, like, okay, well, if you have biological females who are now acting as priests, then what's to stop ones that aren't surgically altered from?
That's already happened in the World Orthodoxy. I'll give you one guess which archdiocese that happened in.
Greek archdiocese?
Yeah.
Well, they have a woman who was
They have a woman, man, priest?
A woman became or transit, or whatever the term is.
Transition to be a man, and they made her, and they quote unquote made them priests.
But only small handfuls of people knew about it because they wanted to keep it hush hush. That happened like in the early 2000s.
Really?
And then, but the funny thing is, if you are, I can think of an instance where somebody in the same archdiocese was a man who was already a priest, decided to go the other direction.
Oh no!
And they took away, or he went into spiritual court and they
defrocked him. But that's ironic. So in other words, if you're an actual guy who becomes a fake woman, you get deposed. But if you're an actual woman who becomes a fake guy, you can be a priest.
Yeah, isn't that interesting logic?
Is this quote unquote priest still alive?
I don't know. I've fallen out of that stuff, so I don't know.
That's terrifying. But we're gonna do more research into it then. And actually, that kind of puts us at the hour and a half mark. And so, give me just one moment. And basically, what I was going to do here, because I've had some family emergencies, so I was actually going to kind of keep the show to. I know it's a Wednesday show. Normally we do 2 hours, but I wanted to keep it to an hour and a half.
Okay.
I'd like to thank everybody on Reader John, not only for contributing, but also for contributing to the discussion personally. And I'd like to thank everyone who commented in the chat, everybody who had questions, comments, etc. And again, thank you for all your support. We will be back to normal on Sunday, God willing. So we're not going to be doing the Wednesday show. And if it's someone else is doing a live stream, we might just raid their stream too. Why not? In any case,
I won't.
All right. I know. It's fine. But in any case, so thank you again, everyone, for listening, commenting, questions, etc. And again, as always, since 2004, NFTU has been reporting on events related to true orthodoxy, as well as underreported events relating to the greatest heresy of our age, ecumenism, a global web of interreligious syncretism in which the hierarchy of world orthodoxy is now inextricably enmeshed. When we began this page, we never thought we'd be in the middle of a global war for the salvation of souls, but things never work out the way that we plan, and now I'm going full-time to expose ecumenical heresy where it can be found, help Orthodox Christians find their way home, and do my part to stop the globalists from fulfilling their plans of one world religion, the religion of Antichrist. But today we need your help. Subscribe and support us at nftu.net, on our Subscribe Star, and on Odyssey. Keep watching. We're just getting started. Everyone have a great night.